Hello, welcome to the IEEE Tech Talk series. My name is Kathy Grice, Senior Program Director with IEEE. IEEE is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. Before we begin, please note a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are engagement tools you can use. All tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to make the most out of your space. You can find answers to some common technical issues in the orange question mark Help tool at the bottom of your screen. If you click the green resource icon at the bottom of your screen, you'll find more information about today's event and future events. Today's session is being recorded. The on-demand link for today's event will be emailed to all registrants later in the day. Our virtual event today is a continuation of a new series of short technical talks jointly brought to you by the IEEE Educational Activities and IEEE Future Directions, featuring subject matter experts discussing the convergence of the latest technologies. Nicholas Knapp, co-founder of Xmark Labs, and Javika Ranawera, principal hardware engineer at Oracle, will address the use of gaming devices to stay connected in today's world by gamers and non-gamers alike to communicate socially. Both Nick's and Javika's bios and photos are available from the registration page. Some of our discussion highlights areas as part of the IEEE Digital Reality Initiative. For more information on the initiative, please go to digitalreality.ieee.org. Please tweet about today's session with @IEEE Future DIR and tag with #IEEE Learn. We welcome your questions. Please submit via the Q&A widget on your screen or click the purple Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. We will respond to your questions as best we can. Gaming has been around for a very long time. As we think about lawn games, to pinball machines, to today's interactive digital games. Nick, as a gamer at heart, please provide a brief history of video games, where they came from, pushing limits with a desire for practical needs, and how they potentially lead to bizarre innovations or happy accidents. Nick?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to talk. The thing I think it's important to understand about games is that unlike a lot of other applications and software that we build, they're really born out of passion and a desire of a creative team or an individual, not a traditional need. In enterprise software, you come up with a sort of product market fit and a particular problem that needs solving and so forth. And games doesn't really work like that, right? It's really driven by passion to create something. And, if you rewind the clock, computers weren't originally designed for gaming at all. Some of the earliest games were played on things like the PDP and other mini computers. And this has led consistently to gamers really kind of exploiting novel aspects and unexpected aspects sometimes of the hardware in order to get the result that they were looking for. So there's a long history of experimentation and innovation in gaming that has led to some interesting sort of happy accidents. In the original Space Invaders game, for example, for those of you that remember that, as you destroyed all of the incoming aliens, the remaining aliens would speed up. And the reason for that was that the CPU and the graphics subsystem were completely maxed out, drawing all of those things on screen. So as it drew less things, it was able to run faster. But the result from a gaming point of view was that, suddenly it seemed like the whole thing was going really, really fast. There are many others that I can think of. There was another game that it was produced by a company I used to work for. And, we found just based on the massive horsepower of the system in a particular area that some things that we hadn't been able to do before, suddenly we could do. And that's a pretty interesting, consistent theme. But many early games also laid the foundation for what we're doing today. You know, you can look back, you can look at the whole of social gaming, which is huge, you know, multiplayer games of all kinds. And that clearly has some roots back in the very early text games from the 1970s that largely ran on university campuses, you know, multi-user dungeons, things like that. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting history behind gaming that has gotten us to where we are today. Another trait that I think is super important to recognize that is now spread into many other areas is this idea of instant usability, even for a complex system. And, you know, back in olden times when coin-operated games and video arcades were the main way that people enjoyed video games, there was a very clear correlation between the success of your game and how quickly people could learn to play it after they put in that first nickel or dime or quarter. And, you know, if you've got a fairly complex fighting game or something with lots of different moves and objectives, that has to be conveyed to the end user very, very simply and very, very quickly. Otherwise, they're going to get pretty mad. And, you know, I forget the precise statistic, but basically you've got, you know, just a couple of coins before people get frustrated and don't play your game anymore. And so, you know, that trend has been core to gaming for a long time, but it's really been exacerbated by mobile. You know, if you look at most mobile apps now, instant understanding is the normal expectation. And that's very much the opposite of enterprise and desktop software. And then there's also a lot of work in incentive systems and social engineering, which we'll come back to a bit later.
Wow, that's a lot to absorb, Nick. Very astute for your comments. Thank you. Javika, continuing on gaming, with the human aspect of gaming, describe ways and how you see gaming shape our future world.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So video games and, of course, the gamers have been a large and a growing part of our culture for a very long time. And they definitely had to deal with a fair share of negative stigma placed upon them by the society. Some, I mean, including myself, believe that they negatively affect the development of the mental process and the physical body of the gamer. I remember a few years ago carefully selecting the games that didn't influence violence and other crimes when buying them for my own children. Probably you already know that last year, even the World Health Organization classified excessive gaming as a mental disorder. But we all know that anything excessive can probably lead into some kind of disorder. If you do something too often and too much, it usually leads to bad health. So addiction is also considered as a major issue that arises when one begins to play video games. They can lead to isolation and antisocial habits. And also they can make the gamers to be trapped in a virtual world away from the real world. This could be for a very long time. Despite these issues, when we begin to identify the positive aspects of video games, it becomes kind of obvious as to how much value they bring and the amount of psychological advantages they bring. For an example, these games are highly stimulating. This kind of stimulation reaches nearly all parts of the brain and leads to high-level thinking, and also help develop the fine motor skills in the kids. So video games can also help those who are suffering from mental disorders, such as anxiety, depression, antisocial personality disorders, even ADHD, PTSD, and Alzheimer's diseases. So especially during a lockdown like the one we are going through right now, playing video games can form strong friendship and can improve emotional well-being among the gamers or the players. So this is a good thing when you consider that 1 in 5 people in the US experience mental health issues every year. Now, gaming is not a perfect world. There are things like gaming addiction that we need to address, of course. But for the most part, it seems that gaming has a positive impact to the society. And as the gaming culture continues to develop and grow, we will see video games playing a huge role in our future. So no wonder the video game industry is such a successful and intriguing kind of industry. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vika. It really makes us think in terms of how does it affect us socially as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So moving to the next question. Emerging and new technology can drive what we can do, and conversely, what we do can drive those technologies. Javika, what roles do you see gaming play in teaching new technologies?
Okay, whether it was to introduce technology used in computers or even to educate users, historically video games were used to help develop computers, while the gamers were given the chance to have kind of a unique and a novel play experience. Because of this, classical computers actually became a part of our lives in a way that we have never experienced before. Also, game design is something that can be sensitive to computational complexity. However, when these complexities increase, we can't solve them within a reasonable time using the classical computers that are available to us today. On the other hand, the quantum computers could speed up our computations in multiple areas. They definitely have the power to solve problems that were previously intractable. So although these quantum hardware is currently still in the prototype stage, we can definitely start looking into solving problems in certain types of games. For an example, if you take the traveling salesman game, the complex optimization problem in this game can be done with a significant speed up when using quantum computers. Then when it comes to Shaw's algorithm that computes prime factors from an integer, computing these factors would take exponential effort for a normal computer, and it kind of becomes practically impossible for larger numbers. But quantum computers will be able to do it without any problem. And they are also able to produce random solutions to computationally hard problems, like generating levels of a terrain for the games. So I think now is the time for the gaming industry to get involved to help shape the future development of quantum computing. This way, we can harness the power of these quantum computers for gaming applications. Now, at the current status, creating like quantum games will feel more like using the Atari 2600 that we had back in, I think, 1977, or the Commodore 64. Maybe in about 5 to 10 years, we may see the era of fault-tolerant and scalable quantum computers. Now, making games using quantum computing is a good way of raising public awareness of this technology. So I think, ready or not, quantum computers are coming to the gaming world, and we should harness their power to improve the games.
Wow, that's very insightful, Javika. Thank you very much. And you're really bringing in today's technology, emerging technologies related to the quantum field. So thank you. Nick, what's your take on my question?
Yeah, I certainly I hadn't thought about applying quantum computing directly to gaming, but I'm sure somebody will do something interesting there. I mean, historically, again, gaming has been fairly quick to adopt and try new technologies. One example that springs to mind relatively recently is blockchain. And, there are some obvious uses for blockchain in gaming, like digital currency. And then there's also some really interesting ones that are a little less obvious, like unique digital items that actually have some provenance. For example, in some big games, you might have an artifact that you win after a certain number of battles, and there's a lot of people vying for this one particular artifact. Using a blockchain approach, you could actually guarantee that there is only one of those artifacts, and you could trace its history as it is won from, by one team, one from another team, and so forth, which is pretty interesting. There's also been some work done to allow assets and things that a player has acquired to have life outside of the original game, so driving interoperability between games. There's groups like the Blockchain Gaming Alliance who are doing a fantastic job of getting people talking. I saw a demo maybe a year ago by some folks from Ubisoft where they were actually creating entire worlds based off basically wallet IDs and transaction IDs. They were using that as a procedural seed to build an entire gaming world, which was pretty interesting. More broadly, if you haven't seen Epic's Unreal Engine 5 demo that just came out a couple of days ago, I strongly recommend Googling and looking at that. I think you'll be fairly shocked at the quality of the graphics. But also sticking on a broader theme, gaming has to address some really serious scaling and technical issues that, frankly, are bigger than most other application areas. If you look at the biggest PC game in the world right now, League of Legends, they have about 8 million concurrent players daily. So it's 8 million people playing alongside each other every day. And then if you look at, the top 10 mobile games combined, they represent more than 5.5 billion players. Pokemon Go by itself had more than 1 billion active players at one point. Yeah. So when you think about networking, real-time streaming, massive real-time multiplayer systems, database scaling, and just scaling your business processes to manage that many users, gaming is really pushing a lot of boundaries in a lot of places.
Double wow. Both of you highlighted so many different complex angles that we don't normally think about. The complexity behind that, the infrastructure, everything. And when you're talking about 1 billion players, it's just mind-boggling. But then could that be a game too, where it affects the mind? But anyway, in addressing today's current COVID-19 world, we must look at opportunities where technologies can help. Nick, what do you see are the benefits, not technologically innovative, but also financially to the gaming industry? I mean, you were talking about 1 billion gamers not that long ago. So it sounds like there's huge impacts, but also we need to drive technology as well. Nick?
Yeah, so I think the financial side was something that we were going to get into a little later. So I'll stick more to the sort of tech impact. Some very obvious things that gaming has done for us. For example, the original low-cost home PC was largely driven by the gaming community, your Timex Sinclairs and products like that. These days we use GPUs for an awful lot of things, machine learning, visualization, things like that. The term GPU was actually coined by Sony as a marketing ploy for the original PlayStation. And it's gaming demand that has largely driven the development and mass market adoption that has made it possible to have GPUs with billions of transistors at a very affordable price. And that's having a huge impact, especially, again, in the machine learning and AI community. And more broadly, training and simulation. Serious games have been around for a long time. There have been a number of papers published showing that games can help kids develop cognitive skills. Not all serious games are good, but some of them are really, quite astonishingly exemplary, like Microsoft Flight Sim. There are a number of anecdotal stories about people in emergency situations having to fly planes, and they had played a lot of Flight Sim and they were able to cope with the situation. I read a thing just this morning that kind of made me laugh. The Providence Journal here near where I'm based in the US, back in 1990, when SimCity was one of the biggest games out, they had all of the mayoral candidates play SimCity. And the ones that lost badly at the game actually saw their poll numbers slide, which is kind of interesting. But more broadly, cheap 3D simulation owes an awful lot to gaming. And once you get outside of the tech, you've got things like incentive systems. Games really understand, or game designers understand incentive systems, how to get players to take certain actions. And this is something where, the majority of games now by revenue are free to play, which means they're free to download, and the developer only makes money from things like in-app purchases and advertising and so on. So the players have to stick around. If the developer can't get them to stick around, they're not going to make money. And that's very different to the traditional model of, buy a title and then that's all the revenue and you don't have to worry about the customer anymore. So it's been a big evolution for the industry, and successful games do this really, really well. And, there was a trend a few years ago in the enterprise for gamification, which is a bit of a gross simplification of the overall idea of incentive systems. But, there are many, many applications where ideally you want people to take certain actions and perform a certain way, and a lot can be learned from gaming. And then more broadly, I mentioned one of the games that's currently got 8 million concurrent players. When you look at total populations of gamers for different games, they are far bigger than the world's biggest cities. Minecraft now has, I think, 480 million registered players. So this is way bigger than any city on the planet. And so, not surprisingly, games are increasingly having to deal with social engineering issues that arise from having massive communities in one place. So there really are a lot of different areas where other industries can take benefit from what gaming has been working on.
Wow, so much to think about here. And Javika, what do you see are the socio-ethical considerations related to advancements in gaming technology? Also, there's a lot of people that are weighing into the Q&A right now. If you can think about too, and how that might help educate using gaming as a platform as well. Thank you.
Okay. So, as we know, the gaming industry is proving to be a thriving industry during these challenging times. Did you ever imagine a time that all the sports leagues in the world would be grounded and even the Olympics to be postponed? So, however we look at the current situation, gaming has experienced tremendous growth over the last few months, and I don't see any signs of slowing down. I think even as the fear of COVID-19 goes away, gaming will give us a venue to express ourselves and engage ourselves with others. Now, here's what I see as problems with this booming industry. The possibility of new games being developed in a hurry to sometimes even to exploit the vulnerability of the society. We know that AI and facial recognition technology can be very powerful and helpful when used correctly, but they can also cause harm with privacy and security issues. For an example, if they are using facial recognition software, we need to check if the software was trained with data that was too narrow, or how accurate is the technology. Are there biases and misinformation in them? Are there checks and balances when it comes to the development of these games? Then we are also concerned about how much we are being watched and if hackers can access to our data. So Also, are they using biased and toxic algorithms that create results with toxic human bias or flaws? So it is upon the developers to be thoughtful about how AI evolves and how they evolve in games and how it impacts the real people, and to create experiences that serve everyone equally. Also, with the use of immersive technologies, there's a very high chance of further widening the gap between the rich and the poor. Because the rich and the privileged can gain access to these technologies long before the others get it. This may end up creating a society with even more injustice than what we see right now. So as we recover as a society, the new game inventors would be or should be mindful of ethical implications when inventing new products. And also we need to ask the questions: Are they purely kind of profit-driven, or are they destined to help the humanity? This is something I always like to remind people when talking about this.
Wow. Both of you covered such a broad range of technologies, from quantum to blockchain to AI. It's incredible how our technologies now are so inter-threaded together that it's not just one technology, but the combination of all those technologies to advance the benefit of humanity here. I usually like to conclude a talk with a look into the future. Javika, where do you see 5 to 10 years from now, how we will leverage gaming in our lives? And we're using gaming as a word today, just a phrase, but gaming can be elevated, right, in terms of what you talked about, the socioeconomic, ethical and everything. But so think of gaming more in a broader term. Where do you see? Predicting into the future. Javika?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we will see kind of very impressive stuff going forward, and kind of very compelling stuff in the coming years. Now, within those, I really would love to see games that understand emotions, games that will have AI characters who could interact with players. This interaction will be based on their emotional state, or the characters that will be able to express emotions, share knowledge, and show behavior so that the player will be completely immersed in the game. I also believe that the future of VR, virtual reality, is going to be more through a social type of VR. It will be an experience that multiple people could share in a uniquely immersive experience. It's like VR meeting AR. You're basically touching something real and augmenting it in some way to get a magical kind of experience. Because of that, there will be more demand for games that blend the virtual world, I think, with the real world. Now, when 5G is available, smartphones will be much faster, and we will no longer experience things like laggy games. And we will be able to play an AR game with lightning speed, I guess. So another thing that from the hardware side, I believe the graphics will get better with further advancement in graphic cards, and they will allow realistic kind of visuals in games to look for them to look more natural, more real. And finally, of course, my favorite is the quantum computers will be part of the gaming world. And we will be definitely harnessing the power to improve the games and also the gaming experience. So these are the things that I believe would happen in the next 5 to 10 years' time. Thanks. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. I hope that really does happen. Nick, what do you envision in gaming 5 to 10 years from now? Will we be unencumbered? Not have to be tied to any one thing. Do we even need devices, right? So, Nick?
Yeah, so there are a few different things I can see. We've got some questions in the queue that kind of boil down to, is gaming really viable? Or a kid's just saying it's a great way to learn because it's fun, and I think outside of gaming, if you look at the history of education, when kids are having fun, they tend to retain information better. So I think that's sort of a self-answering question, right? If you can find a way to make what you're trying to teach engaging and fun, kids are going to retain it. And what I think you have seen because of the pandemic is a number of people that have never played games before starting to become regular gamers. Most of the arts and art forms that we're used to, movie production, and theater, museums, and so on, those can't really happen right now in the way that they used to. But both game production and the playing of games, largely gamers can still, play socially or by themselves. Game production is still happening remotely. You've seen massive growth in the industry. I think Twitch hours for April were up by 50%, almost 1.5 billion hours of people watching Twitch. And I don't think that's all my 11-year-old. I think there's some other people watching it too. Nintendo Switch is up 24%. Player engagement for Microsoft has been up 130%. It's massive growth everywhere. But specifically, I think that will continue. I think you'll see some of the new players that have been brought in continue to play. And that's important because these are people that are not traditionally gamers. There's a lot of talk in gaming about emerging markets beginning to dominate gaming more readily, Middle East, North Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and so forth. The traditional stereotype of the male teen in the basement as a gamer is now a tiny minority of games. So diversity is going to be driven by business necessity, which I think is a nice change to see. As Joika said, the cloud, fog, and edge computing are going to play a much bigger role. We are right on the verge of a console refresh. You've got the PlayStation 5 coming out shortly. It's starting to be teased now with crazy amounts of horsepower. I mean, literally billions of polygons that this thing can do in real-time movie quality rendering. And clearly augmented and virtual reality are going to be a big deal. It's always dangerous to make a prediction, but I would say that AR gaming, augmented reality gaming, is going to skew more mobile and casual, and VR is going to be more niche, sort of more of your traditional core gamer. But I fully expect that it will be a breakout AR game that drives broader adoption of AR.
Very good. Thank you, Nick. My thanks to Nick and Joika. As noted earlier, the on-demand link for today's event will be emailed to all registrants later in the day. Please share with your friends, family, and colleagues. A lot of you have submitted questions and comments. We will capture all these and send out to everybody that has registered via email later. Before you leave, please complete our feedback survey via the survey tool at the bottom of your screen. Thank you and have a great day. This concludes our event.